This triangle pouch tutorial is part of our Pouch Club series with Moda Fabrics. You can find the triangle pouch pattern at soluxfabric.com and at fine quilt shops everywhere. In order to get started, you'll need the pattern as well as at least a 16-inch zipper in length, a mini charm, and a fat quarter. You'll also need some soft and stable or a batting of your choice. You're going to assemble the exterior of the pouch with rows of mini charms or 2.5-inch squares, and you're going to offset the rows by about an inch. And so you'll sew 5 rows together, offsetting them as shown here, and then we'll be ready to quilt the exterior. When quilting these smaller projects, especially when I'm using soft and stable, which is a little bit thicker than typical batting or fusible fleece, I will use a spray-based product like this 505 spray to adhere all my layers together. In this particular pouch, we're going to not only quilt the exterior, but we're also going to attach the lining to the back, which isn't always the case with many of our pouch patterns. But because we'll be binding the inside seams, we're going to go ahead and quilt all the layers together. For this particular pouch, I just sewed straight lines on either side of the seams. Very easy technique, especially if you're new. However, you could also do wavy lines or free motion. These smaller projects tend to be great times to practice free motion. Once you have your pouch exterior quilted, you're then going to trim it as listed or indicated in the pattern. After you trim, you'll stay stitch around all edges of the exterior just to keep all the layers in place. The next step is to bind the 2 short sides of the pouch exterior, and I'm going to attach the binding to the back or the inside of the pouch and then wrap the binding around to the front and top stitch it in place. For smaller lengths of binding like this, I find that I don't necessarily need to use an iron, but you may certainly do so if you prefer. But you can see here that I've wrapped the binding to the front and I'm clipping it in place so that I can top stitch it right at the edge on the front of the pouch to secure everything in place. You're also going to repeat this process on the opposite short end of the pouch, and you can see in this part of the video how close to the edge I'm stitching in order to secure the binding to the exterior. The next step is to install the zipper, and to do this we're going to sew the bound edges of the pouch to the zipper tape. You can see that I've pinned this in place. However, I want to show you how I use a double-sided basting tape, which is my preferred method for this type of installation of a zipper. This particular tape is a 1/2 inch wide, and it's a little bit wider than I need it to be in this instance. And so you can see that I'm just going to trim it down to more of a 1/4 inch or even a little bit smaller. And you'll just stick it where you need it to be, and then you'll peel the paper off, and then you'll be able to stick the exterior of the pouch to the zipper tape. I find this will wiggle a lot less when I'm sewing at my machine, and I'll be happier with my finished product. You can also use this basting tape when you're installing a zipper in the normal way that we would, where we're sandwiching the lining and the exterior. It's a great tool, especially if you're new to zippers. To secure the zipper in place, we're going to top stitch along the edge of the binding. We're doing this just like we did when we attached the binding to the front of the exterior of the pouch, and this will create 2 lines of stitching along the edge of the binding, one on either side, and I think that makes for a really nice professional finish look. The next step is to finish installing the zipper. And if you're using a basting tape, this would be the best time to go ahead and stick that to the opposite edge of the zipper. and get that in place so that you're ready to go. Okay, in order to attach the opposite edge, I'm going to flip the end of the pouch up behind it so that the lining is right side together. And I'm going to give myself a little bit of room, and I like to clip the edges together so that nothing moves around while I'm manipulating the opposite bound edge. And so I'm going to fold that bound edge down on top of the zipper tape, and since I'm using that basting tape, I'm just sticking it in place. If you're not using basting tape, then you would carefully pin it. This is why the zipper being longer than the pouch is really important, and that we leave some room on both sides. So we're going to open that zipper all the way and then flip the pouch so that the exterior right sides are together. And you can see here that I'm just clipping the edges of the pouch in place or together so that it doesn't move around. And then I'm manipulating that zipper tape so that it'll be nice and flat at the top, and I can come in and top stitch it at my machine. And then you'll top stitch this in place just like you did the opposite bound edge, and this will finish the installation of the zipper. The next step is to attach the loop. Follow the directions in the pattern for making the loop strip, and then you can see here that I'm using the binding edges as a guide for where to place my loop. And so I'm going to clip that in place and carefully fold it over and then back kind of under and place it at the other side of the binding so that it will create a nice loop that isn't twisted when I'm finished. Once you have this pinned in place, you'll sew it to just top stitch it at the edge to baste it in place. Note that we're not going to sew across the zipper quite yet. We're almost finished. The next thing we need to do is to open the zipper all the way and manipulate the bag so that the exterior is right sides together and the lining is facing out. And then we'll make sure that we have that loop tucked on the inside, and we'll manipulate this to fold the bag flat with the zipper tape centered in that folded side. And so I'm going to use some clips here on the sides of the pouch to keep everything nice and neat while I'm sewing at the machine. And I'm just going to make sure those zipper teeth are close together. And then I'll take this over and stitch this closed on this edge. This is how we're going to make that triangle shape. The next step is to open the zipper so that we have a lot of room to maneuver the bag right sides out later. And I'm going to pinch the opposite end, the open end, closed with the zipper tape along the edge. And you can see here that I'm going to check to make sure that those binding seams are aligned. And then I'm going to go ahead and clip that edge closed so that I can then go to my sewing machine and sew that seam closed. At this point, you can now trim away the excess zipper tape that you have on the ends, and we're going to get ready to bind the inside seams. So for this step, I will have a strip of binding, and I will have wrapped the raw edge around to the opposite side. You'll see that a little bit better in the next part of the video. But I'm going to use a 1/4 inch seam to sew the binding in place, and then I'll show you how I wrap that around to top stitch it. Okay, so you can see here that I used a piece of binding that was a little bit longer than the actual edge of the fabric, and I wrapped those edges, the raw edges, around to the opposite side so that then when I fold the binding over to cover the raw edge, I can then just a little bit more easily wrap that raw edge of the binding over and catch it underneath the fold coming over the raw edge of the seam. And so once I get that manipulated, I'll clip it in place, and then I'll go back and top stitch that down to finish the edge of that. Once you have the raw edges bound, it's time to turn the pouch right sides out. So we've left that zipper open so we can get in there and have some room to manipulate the bag. And we're going to carefully push it right side out and then use our fingers to just push those corners out to create the shape of the bag. This is a fun pouch to make that's relatively quick as well. We hope that this tutorial was helpful in making your very own triangle pouch, and you can find this pattern at SolexFabric.com and at fine quilt shops everywhere. Thank you so much for watching, and we invite you to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.